Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this webinar today. You're all very welcome. My name is Stephanie McConnell, and I'm a member of the workplace team within Business in the Community. Also in the webinar today, I'm joined by Damien McAllister, Chief People Officer at Ulster University, who's going to be chairing this event. So you'll all be aware that over the past 2 years, all organisations with an office-based workforce have been forced to consider and navigate hybrid working. It's never been tried on this scale before, and we at Business in the Community recognise that it's a new territory for many businesses. Today's webinar is going to consist of 5 speakers from local organisations who will share their thoughts, their planning, their strategies and ideas for transitioning their employees back to the physical workplace. You'll hear today some of the challenges that they've encountered and how these have been overcome. So we're joined today by Sorcha Diver, Head of Compliance and Risk Management at Allstate, Kieran McCallion, Head of HR at Allen and Overy. We've got Laura Lynch, Head of Organisational Development at Queen's University Belfast, Mark Irwin, Managing Director at Ardmore Advertising, and Lauren Glencross, Senior HR Business Partner at Danske Bank. Following each of the speakers today, we'll have a question and answer session, and I would encourage you all to ask questions of our panel using the chat functionality. So just finally from me, just to reduce disruption and background noise, your mics have been muted and your cameras have been turned off. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Damien McAllister. Damien.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and it really is great to be with everybody this afternoon. Stephanie has introduced me, but I should probably also add that I have the title of being the Chair of Business in the Community's Workplace Leadership Team. So I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to be asked to host this event this afternoon. I think it's really hard to believe that we've been living in the COVID world for the last 2 years. I had actually escaped COVID until early last week, and then came down with it, and I'm still testing positive today. So instead of me speaking to you from my office in our new campus in York Street in Belfast, I'm actually speaking to you from home today. But as I say, it really is hard to believe that we passed that 2-year anniversary last week. And I suspect that in that time, employers and employees have had to deal with significant change and adjustments in the world of work. I mean, as a HR professional of over 30 years, I've never encountered a time in human resource and in dealing with our workforce in the regard to the way we've had to deal with it over the last 2 years. And in that space, many employers and employees have, dependent on their sector or their service provision, been back in the workplace for some time. Indeed, there's a number of sectors like the NHS and indeed within the university sector where our people were only literally out of the workplace for a matter of weeks, and we're back into it with a series of strong adjustments being made, compliant with risk assessments. But a lot of organisations are still finding their feet and are beginning to phase their employees back in this current period that we're in. And today I'm really delighted that we're going to hear from 5 organisations who will tell through their stories how they have re-entered the world of work, and more importantly, how they are now futuring the world of work as it happens in the future. So it's a great pleasure. We introduce our first speaker today, who is Sorcha Diver from Allstate. And Sorcha, I believe you're going to share your screen. So you're now the host, and we're over to you for the next 8 minutes.
Super, thank you very much, Damien. And good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be here and to talk about Allstate Northern Ireland's transition back to the workplace. I do have just one slide that I'll share just towards the end of what I'm going to talk about. So I'll do that in a few minutes. So as you've heard, I have responsibility at Allstate for risk and compliance, but I also have responsibility for our admin services functions. And so because of that, including business continuity, incident response, facilities, as well as risk management, I took on the role to head up a group within Allstate to both support employees while we were remote, which in fact we still are. We're hoping to go back and fully reopen our offices just after Easter, but also to think about the future and what the workplace and the model will look like in what we knew was already, a very changed world, as you've described there, Damien. So we had a multi-stakeholder group, and I think this is a really key point. We had representatives from HR, from facilities, from communications team, tech support, and lots of others who worked together on this over the last 2 years. During that time, we surveyed our employees 3 times, specifically on the challenges and benefits of home working and how they were coping, and also on their opinions about home working and what they wanted that model to look like whenever we eventually returned to the office. But although it was apparent from very early on that there would be no return to the office in the sense of going back to what we'd done before, it'd have to be a new way forward, but what would that be? So just to give a little bit of background, we already had home working at Allstate prior to the pandemic. We had up to 3 days a week available to employees to work at home, but we were very much still an office-based, office-focused workplace. But when we realised early on in the 2 years that productivity really wasn't impacted, in fact, in some cases it improved, and in most cases teams and individuals were managing really well. But that was sort of early days in what was an emergency situation. And we did see 3 things as time went on. We saw a real increased desire for home working. Employees really enjoyed it and liked it. But we also found that there really did need to be some in-person time to help connectedness and to help mental health and well-being for people. That was impacted, especially as time went on, and for more junior employees and so on. So we thought if we could bring these together, this increased desire for home working, as well as getting that in-person connectedness and so on, we can have great productivity potentially and great work-life balance and well-being. So how do we do that? We held focus groups at all levels throughout the business, graduates, managers. We spoke to a real diverse population, and we knew that employees really loved the advantages that home working brings. There were some really touching comments that we got back from employees about being able to spend precious moments with family, with children, with pets, and even to spend time outdoors and to take exercise, replacing the time they might have spent commuting. So we didn't want to lose that either. So our resulting policy that we've gone for now and communicated out to employees and hope to live into fully when we go back to the office just after Easter, it's a fully flexible model with between 0 and 5 days in the office or at home. And it's designed to be very flexible for that day, that week, or a different job role or different activity, depending on what you're doing. We decided against setting a specific number of days to be in the office because we felt that the variables of our business need and personal preference for us were really infinite. So we knew that it worked after 2 years of being at home, but based on our culture of leading with empathy, we have asked our managers to have conversations with employees to understand what was going to work best for them and their teams. And we've laid out a whole policy around this so that managers can require team members to come in for certain activities, of course, but they've got to give them reasonable notice. We're to allow them to plan and so on. We want to be reasonable about it. We followed this up by asking each team to look at a team charter. So have a look at what your work tasks are throughout the week, the year, and so on, and think about what tasks does it make sense to come into the office for and which are fine to be done remotely. And we then ask all of our team members to sign up to that and say, yes, that's what we'll do for our team. And we also have tasked our managers with looking at the employee life cycle to understand which events to conduct in person and face-to-face and which are fine to be done remotely. For example, we always want managers to see staff face-to-face on their first day and ensure that a new employee's first days and weeks have lots and lots of face-to-face contact. We're also aware, and I'll just touch briefly, that there's risk around this approach. There's risk around a hybrid approach. May need to take potentially even legal advice to consider it for your business. We realised that not only did we need to have our hybrid working policy in place, but we also needed to think about lots of other policies that were linked to that so that it all made sense holistically. And we created and updated policies where we needed to do that. We also know that this is absolutely a journey. We will need to change it and update it as we go. And so we thought about things like, proximity bias. If you've got groups who may prefer to be at home, and groups who prefer to be in the office, is there that risk of a 2-tier workplace where some people might feel that they're more in the loop if they're in the office, and the risks around that. So we really want to educate our leaders on that so they're aware of the risk and monitor those risks as we go forward. And then I just want to touch on the physical workspace. As I'm obviously head of facilities, that's really something that I think about quite a lot. And we knew it just didn't make sense to come back to the same rows and rows of desks that we had before, because the new model just doesn't work like that. So we really wanted to make data-driven decisions. So we haven't made huge changes yet. We want to monitor how people are using the space whenever we go back so that we know what we need to change and how we need to change it. But we have made a few changes, which I'll just mention. So people no longer have their own desk. They'll be able to choose from any desk whenever they come in, and they'll book a seat at that desk before they come in, and they can do that up to 30 days in advance. We've got the same equipment at all of our desks across our 4 office locations in Northern Ireland and in our London office. And we've created neighbourhoods so that employees will know where to find their team members, but they can actually sit anywhere with someone from another team if they want to, if that suits their plans for that day. And we have also created some new and pretty amazing collaborative space in each building. And these are specifically designed for this new way of working. We actually removed nearly 200 desks in 2 of our offices to create this space. And we've plans to potentially remove another 300 in our Belfast building to allow for smaller collaborative spaces throughout the building, as well as other facilities, such as a wellbeing hub for our employees. So I'll just very briefly share this view, if I can. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So that's our Belfast collaborative space that we have created specifically for our hybrid model. And you can see it's got space to work for small teams, larger teams, to do specific types of sessions, maybe strategy sessions. And it's also crucially got some space to connect, because we think that's just really, really important, and some space to socialise. So I think it looks fantastic. You probably agree. I'm really looking forward to getting back and being able to use that space and work in it. So just to finish off, I'll just talk briefly about technology and mindset. We know that technology is going to be really critical to communicate when you're in the office with those people who are still remote. So we've installed some Zoom rooms and some neat boards to help us with this. And we've also, Allstate's also rolled out a programme to help employees to purchase equipment to use at home now and into the future. And mindset, I think, is going to be a really, really key piece of this as we go forward, and leader role modelling. We've talked a lot, as you can probably tell, over the last 2 years about what people's preferences were and how remote has worked for us and what we'd like to do in the future. But we need our leaders now to really live into what's best for their team and into that hybrid model. So that's something that we're working with them on and creating awareness and education around. So I'll just leave you with just a couple of parting words. I do truly believe that in terms of new ways of working, we can take the best out of what has been a very, very difficult 2 years in so many ways, and use that to guide us forward to enable a better future with real benefits to business and benefits to employees in those businesses as well. So Damien, I'll hand back to you. That's me for today.
Thank you very much, Sorcha. That was really, really some interesting points, sir. I particularly love leading with empathy. And maybe that's a webinar for a different day, but you've set the bar very, very high, particularly with the pictures of the office space that you've got now, and also the removal of the desks and creating the wellbeing hubs and collaborative spaces. So thank you very much. And I'm sure there will already be some questions going into the chat box for us to focus on later. So now I'd like to introduce Kieran McCallion. Kieran is the Head of Human Resources at Allen & Overy. So Kieran, it's great to have you with us and good to see you again. And over to you now for the next 8 minutes.
Thanks very much, Damien. Afternoon, everybody. Yeah, there's not. I think Sorcha's covered everything, so we can all go home now, Damien. I think job done. But I'll try and give you a sense of how we've approached this challenge. I've jotted down some points. I think the key thing that you should consider going into your conversations with employees about returning to the workplace is communication. Clearly, you cannot do enough of it. And it's a two-way thing. So it's obviously there are messages which you will want to get out, but obviously there's an awful lot of listening, which you as employers should be doing around what are your people's concerns, and start to think about how you can address those. So like Sorcha has mentioned, we did a lot of that, and that was carried out through surveys, through focus groups, and just basically through being in contact with via line managers and directly with our people over the last 2 years. So I think first and foremost, have a good communications plan. What are your key messages? What are your different mediums or media that you want to use to get those messages out there? And then equally, what's your pipeline for getting information and feedback back from your people? Really, I can't stress how important that is to cover that off. The other thing which we had to consider is the sheer volume of new hires that we've had since the pandemic began. So we can't operate with a mindset that we're all going back to a familiar workplace. For some of us it is. For others, Allen & Overy is a completely new employer, and in many cases, joining A&O is the first time someone has been in employment, if they're a recent grad or an inexperienced hire. So we really need to think about our ways of working and not assuming anything, so that we're very clear what it is that people are coming back to, or what they're going to see for the first time. So we did run orientation days over the last 2 years when the restrictions, when we saw that they were easing. So we encouraged people to come in for a day, and we managed that so it was always done in a socially distant way, but just so people could see the office and reacquaint themselves with the facilities and get a good grip of what it is that they've actually physically joined. Other points to bear in mind is be prepared for the unexpected. Things are going to come up that you haven't encountered before, or you will get questions that you haven't been asked before, and that's entirely fine. So for every number of employees you have, you're going to have different variations of questions and concerns. So be ready for that. And I think if you have your comms plan in place, that will be very helpful. Be prepared for the slip-ups. Okay, you will encounter cases that probably have emerged in the workplace. Don't panic. Have in place your test and trace and guidance documentation, which will help you guide you through that. And it'll also demonstrate to your people that you have put together a COVID secure workplace, and you've thought of, you've tried to cover every eventuality. But things like that will crop up. There will be bumps along the road, but rely on your documentation and on your comms, and that'll help you out of it. On that point, have a risk assessment. I think we're required to have them. Have a specific COVID risk assessment that will help you and help also demonstrate to your people that it's COVID secure. It'll help people who are concerned about returning to the workplace. They will see the measures that you've taken to make the place COVID secure. And you could be asked for it if there is an outbreak, which is linked to the workplace. The council or the HSE might ask for that, so it's very handy to, it's very useful to have that for those obvious reasons. Don't make big decisions too hastily as well. So we're finding ourselves now where we are starting to return to the office, and we're doing it on a 60-40 basis. So that's 60% of time over an average of 12-week period that we expect people to spend in the office. So that doesn't mean 3 days a week. It doesn't mean, it will vary across all that period. But what is happening is that we're seeing people coming forward right now with requests for 100% remote working without having tried the 60-40. And when that happens, and if you were to, as an employers and people in HR, you'll know this, if you approve flexible 100% flexible working request, if that's outside your norm, you're creating precedents across your organizations, and in fact you may be creating situations where somebody's looking for a level of flexibility that you can't afford them, in which case you're going to turn down that flexible working request, and in which case you will have a disengaged employee potentially. So don't try and encourage people to try it out before veering too widely from the norm, whatever that norm will be. So try and steer people away from making too hasty decisions about their working patterns. Support your line managers. It's really important. So make sure that they are. It's very clear what is expected of them. They're going to have to navigate an awful lot of change with their teams, and their teams are going to look to them. So you can't do enough really about equipping them with information, and what we did there as well as giving them access to all of the communications materials that we've got. We have had line manager forums where it was a safe place for line managers to come together and really question and pick apart the firm's approach to hybrid working, so that they were ready for any questions that they would be getting. And then finally, I'll just bookend it again, just by talking about communication. I think it's been grounded in that. Our success so far, say we're only 2 weeks into hybrid working, has been really aided by clear communications along the way. So just really have that plan in place. So as I say, we are 2 weeks in. This is the first Monday or second Monday of hybrid working, and we're starting to really see things pick up in the office across the 5-day period. And we're starting to see the elements of our culture and our community and how we learn. We're starting to see that picking up again. So it has been successful. It's early days, but it has been successful so far. That was it for me, Damien.
Thank you very much, Kieran. And again, really appreciate you taking the time, and a couple of key things that have come out of it there. You mentioned right at the very end, culture and community. And I think we'll probably see them as being common currency in all of our speakers today, because I think very much it's organization specific as well. But I do think your words about being prepared for the unexpected are really critical, because I think that's the world we're living in now in the COVID environment, that it's going to be ongoing, and we're just going to have to be resilient to be able to deal with this. So thank you very much, Kieran. I know there's a couple of questions that popped into the chat box. I'm going to pick them up and ask you them at the end, but you might want to have a look in the chat box now, Kieran, because I'll probably ask them of all people, but they are directed towards yourself. So thank you very much. Okay, so it's great to have a colleague from higher education here with us today, a very great colleague, Laura Lynch. Laura, you're the Head of Organisational Development for Queen's University Belfast, and it's great to have you along with us today. So Laura, now over for you for your 8 minutes.
Thanks, Damien. Yeah, it's great to be here today, and I think it's important to contribute to this conversation, which really has implications for us all. It feels like we've been planning for a return of staff for quite some time, and as Damien mentioned at the start, I think what's important for us is to recognise those staff who have remained working throughout the pandemic. So we would have had researchers, academics and technical staff supporting COVID efforts, security and porters and cleaning staff and gardeners maintaining the campus. So it's important to recognise those people that were here. That said, many of our staff continued to work fully remotely throughout the pandemic. Last summer, we actually made the decision that we would start in-person teaching in September. So that was a year after remote teaching, which really meant that academic staff and those professional staff supporting education and the student experience would be returning to the workplace. So at that point, there was a significant increase in the number of staff who came onto the campus, but many functions like HR and finance, so those support functions remained working from home. We then started to plan for November 21 to return to campus, and actually we were so confident that we were going to come back that we launched a 12-month pilot of agile working, which I'll tell you a bit more about shortly, from the 2nd of November. However, the full return didn't happen given the progress of the pandemic at that time, and actually just before Christmas we announced that most teaching would take place remotely in January 2022. And then February 22, we switched back to in-person teaching. And I suppose I'm trying to illustrate there was a lot of flexibility shown by our staff, transitioning from one mode of teaching to the other, from in-person to remote. And then actually in February, we had hoped that the guidance, the working from home guidance would be lifted so that we can transition the remainder of our staff back. However, given the situation with the executive, this didn't happen. So actually earlier this month, Queen's took a decision to independently review our position regarding working from home. And we wanted to provide clarity and stability for staff. And that was actually in response to staff feedback that we had received during the pandemic. And I think it links back to Kieran's point around that comms is so important. So we said basically for those staff that were adhering to the working from home guidance, in order to support their transition back to work, that the expectation was that from actually today, they're required to return to pre-COVID on-campus working patterns for a minimum of 40%. So we give them a 2-week lead notice so they could make plans and get ready for coming back. And then for 2 weeks, we are then going to work 40% of the time as a minimum on campus. And then thereafter, the agile working pilot, which I referred to earlier, will apply. I certainly think that the introduction of this pilot has and will support our staff as they transition back to campus, because it will provide them with the reassurance on the flexibility in their working patterns as they return. At Queen's, we had actually started to review our approach to flexible working before the pandemic started. And I suppose what we did find is the pandemic enabled us to advance our approach to flexibility and our working practices much quicker than we would have done had it not happened. Staff were telling us before the pandemic that we needed to do more to support their health and well-being. And when we asked them practically what sort of things that might be, they told us that we needed to review our approach to flexible working. They told us, however, they didn't feel that the culture in Queen's supported flexible working. They reported a lack of trust between line manager and the employees, a general fear that people might misuse it. And they told us that they wanted to see more opportunities to work from home and to flex their start and finish times. And there has been flexibility in the university for some staff, so particularly academic colleagues, historically, and also there were some local areas where there was flexibility, but there was a real lack of consistency, and there was very limited guidance and support for managers and staff to actually work that way. So at the start of 2020, got a working group together to take forward a review of flexible working, and within a matter of months, most staff were enforced into a form of flexible working, so we were all working from home. So during the pandemic, we really took an opportunity to co-create with our staff our new approach, our agile working approach. We asked the staff throughout the pandemic what was their experience of flexible working, albeit that it was enforced and many were juggling work and caring responsibilities. Basically, staff told us, and they highlighted that the pandemic had actually challenged some of the barriers to flexible working that I previously mentioned. So staff were actually telling us that they felt trusted and they felt empowered. It was really clear that staff had mixed experiences of flexible working. So some were saying that it supported work-life balances. Others said it negatively impacted work-life balance and reporting an always-on culture being normalised. Some people said their line managers were more supportive. Others said they were less supportive. We found that flexibility wasn't for everyone, and there were staff that were really keen to get back to their previous work pattern. We found that technology helped some work flexibly, whereas for others it was a hindrance. And some staff were telling us that they were reassured by the safety measures that we had put in place, which we communicated to them, whereas others were concerned about safety measures when they were coming back. I suppose the one thing that there was broad agreement on was that there was an overwhelming preference to retain flexibility going forward. So what we did was we firstly actually looked at our formal flexible working policy, and in line with the CIPD's Flex for First campaign, we actually introduced a day one right to flexible working. The second thing we did then was to develop our agile working guidance, and it was most important because it was going to have the biggest impact on staff. The key elements of this, and we really focused on these, as important was we recognized and we communicated clearly that meeting student needs and achieving our teaching and research priorities are central to what the university does. And it's these things that should inform how we work, how we design our work and our ways of working. So we really made that up front because, we are an on-campus, we're a university, staff need to be on campus to provide a good student experience. We were going to provide informal flexibility, but those arrangements were to be agreed by each team with their line manager through team standards. So the team standards being respectful of the different and changeable needs of staff, balanced by the role that they do, the type of work the team was delivering, the impact on other teams, and also their stakeholders. And we were also clear that they weren't permanent and were subject to ongoing and continuous review. We widely consulted with staff whenever we were developing the guidance, and we included all our internal networks, and we also consulted with the Labour Relations Agency and took legal advice like others have done. And then we launched in last November. And I think, as it has been said previously, the focus in this pilot year is on experimenting with new ways of working. So it's looking at different approaches to see what works best. And I think one of the things that's important to highlight is that we're piloting the process, not the concept. So it's not a pilot and we're going to take it away after 12 months and say no agile working. It's just how we best achieve it. The process is the main thing that we're piloting. In support of then the new agile working approach and to address some of the challenges that we identified through staff feedback, we have arranged a support in place for staff and managers to support these new ways of working, which are mainly hybrid at the moment. So we have support from our senior leaders. So we actually clearly commit in our new strategy to provide more opportunities for flexible working. So it's really good to have that up front and to have that support. As Kieran's talked about, communication. As far as we can, we are communicating our plans to staff so that they can prepare, there's no surprises, and they can prepare for changes in their working patterns. And obviously with the launch of the Agile pilot, there's been a big communication plan around that. We've developed online toolkits, templates, FAQs, and also, I think somebody picked this up in the chat, provided additional support for managers to manage Agile teams, because we recognise that that's different. So we've run a series of short workshops on how to performance manage, communication, engagement, and most importantly, fostering an inclusive culture, which very much focuses on developing compassionate management approach based on trust and empowerment, and also about challenging one's own bias, and also understanding and avoiding proximity bias. So some of the things that have been mentioned previously. Also put in place a range of support for staff and managers. Workshops focus on building resilience and managing the transition back to on-campus work, focusing very much on mental health awareness, recognising that there may be a psychological transition for some staff who maybe haven't been back in a year. And then also provided ongoing reassurances of the safety measures in place. I mean, I'm nearly finished. The safety measures in place. I'm nearly there. But around risk assessments and just really communicating that. And I suppose then, as I mentioned at the start, this is really our first day of having made the decision that we want everyone to transition back on campus. I suppose we really want to make it successful and build on the trust and flexibility that has been shown during the pandemic. Staff have, in a recent survey, told us that they had some concerns that maybe Agile working wouldn't be embraced across university. So we're already starting the feedback process. We're not waiting until the end of the pilot. We're going to get feedback as we go along through the similar methods that others have talked about, and then use that to inform then the future changes to the way that we work, and also the physical workplace itself. Sorry, Damien, did I go over me?
Okay, Laura. I just let you run over because you were in full flow. Would have been rude to stop it. Thank you very much, Laura. I suppose there are questions in the chat box. We'll pick them up later on. But one thing that really struck out for me was when you said about this is a pilot year ahead for the process, not the concept. I think that's really important because it feels like we're all learning as we go here. And it's just, there's a commitment that this is going to be enduring within QUB, and that actually the processes may change at the edges, but we are living in a different world now. So that's great. Thank you very, very much. Okay. Mark, delighted now to introduce Mark Irwin, who is the Managing Director of Ardmore Advertising. Mark, you're very, very welcome, and you're now the host. Over to you.
Thanks, Damien. Thanks for the intro, and thanks also to BITC for the opportunity to share our story today. I suppose to start with a little bit of context, because we're probably not known to everybody in the call in the same way some of the other organizations are. So Ardmore is a marketing communications agency based in Hollywood. We're anything between 60 and 70 people, depending on what particular month of the year you're talking about. Associated with us is LK, which is a public relations agency, and we also have an e-commerce digital performance marketing agency called Built for Growth, which is also in the constellation of Ardmore companies. What is common across all of those businesses is that for us, which I'm sure is the same in many respects for you guys, talent is absolutely critical to our competitive advantage. So getting this right is really important. Our approach is bespoke based on the different companies, because they do different things, and the suitability for flexible working from home, working from anywhere, whatever way you want to describe it, is different based on the different skill sets that are required. So Ardmore is really about ideas, really powerfully different ideas, and so it's very, very important that we're back together as quickly as possible. And most of our team, or at least a large portion of our team, have been back together since about August 2020 was when we started bringing people back into the office to a certain degree. And obviously there've been a couple of bumps along the road since then, but we've been pretty much back together for a long period of time. And I think probably interesting to hear from our point of view, because we're a wee bit further down the line than maybe some are in terms of the coming back. So let's start with what we knew way back then. We knew that keeping people safe was going to be absolutely critically important, and we did everything we possibly could to make sure that the working environment that people were coming back into was as safe as possible, and we had really robust systems for making sure that if we had an issue, that we reacted very, very quickly and kept everybody safe. And thankfully, we, to this point, have had absolutely no instances of any transmission of COVID in the workplace. So that's been really important. Secondly, we measure absolutely everything, and we were able to see that the impact of those 3-4 months in terms of our commercial performance, we saw a really marked decline. Depending on the month, depending on the team that you looked at, our billable utilization, which is a sort of a key metric that we have about how much time you're spending actually working for a client that is likely to be paid for, it dropped from anything between 4% and 7%. And when you add all of that up at the end of the year, it's quite a considerable number. So we knew there was a fairly significant commercial impact on us. We also knew that our understanding of our clients' problems, which typically over a cold drink or a coffee or whatever, we get the knowledge and the understanding of. The fact that we weren't meeting face to face was also impacting the work that we were doing for our clients. We also knew that we have a pretty young bunch of people, and they're very keen to interact with each other and meet with each other. And we knew that that was having an impact on them in terms of their quality of life and their well-being. And all of these things were obviously of a concern to us. And sorry to sound a wee bit like Donald Rumsfeld, but there were also known unknowns in the sense that we couldn't measure what we knew we were losing in the areas of team collaboration. So just, an example of that is that there's numerous examples daily in here of problems being solved just by the serendipity of somebody overhearing what somebody else is talking about. And we knew we were losing that, but we didn't know how much that was costing us. Creative sparking, so the ability to put a number of different people in a room, all of which have different points of view. That cognitive diversity to problem solving was critically important, and obviously we couldn't do that, and trying to replicate it over video was very, very difficult. We knew we were losing out on coaching and mentoring, both the giving of it and the receiving of it, because actually the giving of it's also a critically important piece of what we tried to do here, and the opportunity to do it was being lost in the sense of trying to replicate that over video was difficult. And also we were losing out on people's ability to prepare for their next job, for the promotion that they were doing, and how they were going to learn to be able to do that, but also how they were going to be able to demonstrate that they were ready for that next stage is also difficult to do in this remote working environment. So we were left with, well, what does all of this mean? And really we boiled it down into a sentence or two. We said that we know that we're a business which works much better when we're together. And that's for the most part, because there are certain roles and there are certain things that's better for us to be a part of. But for the most part, we're better when we're together. But we also know that the toothpaste is out of the tube in many respects in terms of all of the benefits that accrue both to the business and to the individual of remote working. So we wanted to arrive at a policy really that allowed us to get the best of both worlds. But how do you do that, I suppose, in a how do you get a coherent policy in an uncertain environment? And it remains, I suppose, to this day an uncertain environment. It was certainly very uncertain back when we were designing this. Like the other speakers have said, my first piece of advice would be to consult with absolutely everybody who has an angle on it. There's lots and lots of things that you wouldn't ordinarily consider without speaking to everybody. My second point in this is just make a decision, because you can ask people, and the speakers have talked about this, you'll get the same spectrum of opinion that you would have on society is if your workforce reflects society, you'll have a spectrum of opinion on what to do. So you've got to make a decision at the end of the day. Once that decision is taken, whatever it is, communicate that really clearly and be prepared to have to repeat it over and over and over again, because my experience is certainly that no matter what you say, you can't really control what people hear. And so you'll have to repeat yourself a lot. And you have to keep it consistently under review. There's absolutely no point putting something in place that says this is the way it's going to be and that'll be the way that it is forever, because I think that unwillingness to be flexible around this is a poor reflection probably on management and attitude of the business. Definitely do not expect everyone to agree with your decision. That is for absolute sure. But hopefully you can communicate it in a way that makes sense, so that even if people don't agree, that they're able to accept it. And I think in very extreme cases, and certainly I can think of a couple, be prepared to lose people, because we're a talent-based business, but we're not a talented at all costs business. And in our case, when we know that we work better together, people that definitely don't want to be together, you have to ask yourself the question: are they right for this particular organization? And certainly that may well be the case as you go through it. So what did we do? What we haven't done is anything as formal as decide on 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week not, and some of the other variations that we've heard of today. We took a decision very early on that baking in a solution that was going to guarantee us not being together was not going to be a good thing. So what we decided to do was we've created a flexible working policy. And what we say to people is, we work better together, but you're an adult and we trust you to make the right call. If you can work better from somewhere else, and that may not be your home, then communicate that clearly as early as possible and just do it. Your start time, your finish time, how long you take for lunch, all of those things are entirely up to you, because you're an adult and we trust you. And if you want to work from another location because you've got life administration to take care of, be honest about that. You're not working if you're at the solicitors signing papers. You're not working if you're looking after children, because I know to my own experience that's very difficult to do. Just be open and honest about those things.
About 45 seconds.
That'll do me, Damien. Thank you. Just to close up, what we have learned is that firstly, everything is going to be okay. It'll sort itself out. If you don't believe me, we often dive into the psychological drivers, and one psychological driver that our psychology department talked to me about early on was hedonic adaptation. And this is work on three guys whose names I find it difficult to pronounce, back in 2006. But basically what they said is, good or bad, any subsequent positive or negative feelings, people return to a relatively stable baseline after the effect. And that has been the case with regards to how we have gone about things. And then the second thing, if you don't believe the psychological effect and you don't believe me, let's look at the markets. Zoom's share price on the 21st of February 2020 was $100. On the 16th of October, it was $560, and that was the time to sell it, because today it's worth 114. And I think that's the market's comment on where we are and what sort of change. It's not no change, but it's not as seismic a change as maybe we believed back in October. There are loads of examples of that. So the e-commerce as a percentage of retail sales has reverted back to a normal but increasing pattern. Cinema audiences are back to where they used to be, and searches for business suits. If you look at the Google search information on that, you'll find that has normalized also. So that's really our story. And what I wanted to say was that, based on our experience of being a wee bit ahead of the curve on this thing, everything has been okay, but it's obviously important that you do as much as you possibly can to smooth that transition.
Well, thanks, David. Thank you very, very much, Mark. I mean, there's a lot in that, but just to pick one thing out, I think the concept of make a decision and stick to it, but keep it under review is really, really critical, because I think that's what a lot of staff look to. They just want decisiveness. They kind of want the decision made, and then we go from there. So that's fantastic. I'm sure, Mark, there'll be questions that we'll come back to in the Q&A. So thank you for that. And that brings us on to our final speaker, and by no means least, Lauren Glencrose, who is a senior HR business partner at Danske Bank. Lauren, you're very, very welcome, and you're now given over as host.
Thank you very much, Damien, and lovely to be here with you all today. So I suppose I wanted to start off just by giving you an insight into our business. So I feel really proud to be representing Danske Bank here today, as we work on the belief that when you're part of our business, it's more than just having a job. It's a place where we want everyone to be able to thrive, to belong, and to really feel that they can do their best work. So we're really passionate about being a best company to work for, and this has helped us to shape and inform the way in which we've supported our people back through the transition to the workplace. So I suppose, again, just to set some context, pre-COVID, the majority of our employees worked from office locations. We weren't really an organisation where people would have worked from home. And then during the pandemic, those of our employees who could work from home did so. But like others, we still had a number of staff who had to come into work in our branches and our head office as well. So we're now in a situation where our employees have been asked to come into the office for 1 day a week. And for the remaining days, they can choose where they work. So they can continue to work from home. They can come into the office for additional days, or they can choose to work from maybe another bank location that might be closer for them. Like others have mentioned today, we have seen so many benefits from working from home, but we've also seen real challenges in terms of people managing their work-life balance and well-being, people maybe feeling disconnected from their teams. And what we're seeing is, whilst many of our employees are really excited to return to the office, some do have genuine concerns about transitioning back. So when I consider our return to work model, we really considered 3 elements in this. And like the other speakers today, communication was a really key part of this. So early on in the pandemic, we recognised that we had an opportunity to introduce some long discussed changes to the way we wanted to work as a business. And we really wanted to be a business that could provide more flexibility around where and when we worked. So 3 months into lockdown, we set up a specific project, and that was dedicated to better ways of working. And this allowed us to think about our post-pandemic working model and allow us to meet not only our business needs, but our colleague needs as well. So again, it was really important for us to engage our employees in this. So as a starting point, we carried out a survey and asked our employees what was working for them and what wasn't. And this helped us to establish what we wanted to do going forward. What was really interesting from our survey was that over 2/3 of people who could work from home told us that they actually wanted to continue to do that at least 3 days a week. So we're realising that to attract and retain the best talent, we're going to have to adapt to these expectations. And I think giving our employees that voice in the return to work plan has really helped us to drive engagement and help create a really positive return to work. The next step for us then was to run a pilot. We had people who were telling us actually they really wanted to be back into the office and they were struggling working from home. So we decided to give these people an opportunity to come in early and use their feedback then to make adjustments to the colleague experience. Another thing we then did was actually use these people as advocates to encourage other people to come back. So we got them to share their experiences with their colleagues in the hope that this would then encourage more people to come back. But we still obviously had people who were apprehensive about returning. So what we did for these people was we offered them building tours so that they could clearly see the safety measures that were in place, just to give a little bit of extra reassurance before coming back in. And again, we asked our managers to really take ownership on this as well and to have one-to-one conversations as well with people and really put them at ease before they came back in. Was really important in all this. There was obviously a lot going on, so we needed to have a really comprehensive communications plan, and that involved our executive teams, our local leaders, but we also created a network of change champions. And in these change champions, each area of the business was represented and they could feed in any specific concerns that they had about coming back as well. And then we created a specific site on our internal website, which had FAQs, guidance on what to expect when coming in, images and videos of working space. And this was all just to ensure that the return to work was as easy as possible from a practical and a logistical perspective. The next element then that we considered was purpose. And the overwhelming feedback in our business is that people have told us that they do not want to come into the office to do things that they can do as easily at home. So they don't want to come in and sit on video calls all day or with their headphones in working away. They want to use the time in the office to have meaningful collaborations. So this is a real journey that we're on at the minute in considering how can we make it worthwhile for people to come in. So in all our messaging, we're really clear that people need people and that we need time together to maintain what's really good about our culture. So we've introduced a concept of concentration, collaboration, and connection. So this basically means we want our employees to work from home for that concentrated focus work that they need to be alone for, but when they come into the office to use that time to connect and collaborate. So for example, we have tech and digital teams who've been doing hackathons, they've been doing demo days, sharing knowledge. In other departments, things really as simple as having a weekly face-to-face team meeting has worked really well. But we've also encouraged our business areas to use this time to encourage social connections. So for example, having a team lunch or adding half an hour on to the start of a meeting, but just using that time to have a coffee and a catch up. And then, like others, we've considered how we work physically. So we have a specific area now which is dedicated to collaborative workings. We have our screens, our whiteboards, and our breakout areas. But we've also created reset space in our buildings, and this is just to allow people to take time out away from their desks, which is perhaps what they've got used to doing at home. And again, for each area in our business, we asked our employees to design this reset space so they really felt that they were feeding into it. And again, another big change for us was introducing flexible desking, where our colleagues can book desks for their days in the office. I would say this has been a really big shift for our colleagues, but again, it's allowed them to see when their colleagues are coming in and be able to work in proximity with their own teams. And then I've touched on collaboration, but this was the final element of our return to work model. And one of the big concerns we had on this is, how do we ensure people still feel included if they don't choose to come into the office as much as some of their team members? So if I only want to come into the office 1 day a week, but all my team want to come in 3 days a week, how do I still feel like I'm part of that team and that my ideas are being heard? So to alleviate this concern, we've introduced a principle of video and virtual first. So unless all attendees can physically be in the same location, a meeting should be held by video. And again, this is to prevent any proximity bias. And then finally, we have recognised that our new hybrid model has prompted us all, but in particular leaders, to think differently about how we build connection, collaboration and trust within their teams. So to manage this, we've put all our leaders through a new programme called Adaptive Leadership, and this helps them to get ready to lead not just today, but in the future. And this has really prepared our people to continue to adapt, but it's also allowed them to build connections with other leaders outside their immediate areas and learn from each other in smaller peer coaching groups. So I suppose to summarise the main learnings for us, as I said, communication. I think getting your employees really involved in the decision making and being really clear with them every step of the journey really helps to alleviate some of the anxieties around work. I think again, making that time in the office purposeful, but again, asking your employees what type of things they want to be focusing on when they come into the office, and then letting them use their time at home for the work that requires more concentration. And then just remembering that there isn't a one size fits all. So while a lot of people in our organisation are really happy just to come in 1 day a week, we have other people who've told us that they can't cope well working from home and they need more time in. So just really being mindful of that and getting a balance that works for everyone. But again, as the other speakers have said, just continuing to adapt and realising that the things may need to change as we progress on this journey as well. And that's me, Damien. I will pass back to you now.
Thank you very much, Lauren, as he struggles to get off mute. As everybody has struggled to get off mute for the last 2 years. Can I just thank all of our 5 speakers? I mean, that was just over 40 minutes, but I have to say, probably as rich as 40 minutes of content and delivery that I've had over the last 2 years. So well done to everybody. But we are going to move to that point now, which is the grueling question and answer. I know in this online world, we've been asking people to put questions in the chat box, but if you do wish to ask a question and you're happy enough to come off mute, please stick your hand up. But I do have a number of questions that have been put into the sidebar, so thank you for those that have. First one I'm going to pick actually is one that's probably one of the last ones there, and it's from Rhonda Armstrong. And I probably will ask this firstly of Laura Lynch and then Kieran McCallion, and that is, how are companies dealing with flexible working requests for hybrid working when companies are now introducing hybrid working as a pilot that can be reviewed and revised? Now, I will come to Sorka and Lauren and Mark for an answer now, but if I can start maybe with you, Laura.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is...
Laura, you kind of went a wee bit quieter.
Oh, here, sorry, and my mic away. I must have been having a drink of water. What we've tried to do, we have introduced agile working because we want to get away from, people having to put in, staff having to put in formal requests that, obviously take up time and energy to work through. So by introducing this pilot, we're saying to staff that if it doesn't impact your terms and conditions and you can agree it locally, then that's the way that you should go. And so far so good. It's early days, but I do suspect that we may get to a point maybe when some staff we can't accommodate particular arrangements on a permanent basis, that we may see an increase, but at the moment we're really just trying to promote the informal route.
Okay, here.
Exactly the same here. So allow line managers to make those decisions within the spirit of our hybrid working approach to get people to give people what they want. If something permanent is being sought, however, that does become a little bit more formal. And then, you know, the irony of it is that it becomes inflexible at that point, because it's baked into someone's terms and conditions. Whereas at the moment we have, you know, quite a lot of flexibility in place for people to work within hybrid working. So but it is early days. And we're only at the start of these conversations. So as problems emerge or as challenges emerge, we might have to change our approach. But that's where we're at.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I think we're on to for the simple answer is this is one probably to watch as we go, because I think we are in early stages of what the pilot might be. So it is one that will probably get more clarity as we move forward. Yeah. Okay, one of the other questions, and I'll direct this probably firstly to Sorcha and then to Mark and then Lauren. The office buzz has gone. People have come back and kind of felt what they had pre-pandemic has now changed. What have you done to try and encourage that office buzz to come back?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's one that we had been very much conscious of. I mean, some of the things that I talked about in terms of the collaboration space, so enabling spaces for people to specifically come together. Others talked about it as well in terms of encouraging people to have more social time, have tea breaks, you know, make that time to connect, because that's really the piece that has been missing, and to have that kind of human connection. So we, through our existing kind of volunteering work, or sports and social and other activities that we would have had in person, and some of which have had to stop completely over the past 2 years, it'll be very much communicating those out and encouraging use of those, encouraging use of the buildings for that, and the use of the office for that, and getting people together wherever we can to kind of have that. To really bring that buzz, I think it's going to be really important. Of course, we do want to bear in mind those folks who will want to be full-time at home, and we want to be able to bring them in wherever we can. So again, the technology comes in there where you can have something that's both in person, but you've got people feeding into it so that they can also experience that kind of atmosphere and feel that connection to the company and to the to those events. So that's going to be really important for us.
Thank you, Sorcha. Mark?
Yeah, similar to Sorcha there, we have a very strong program in place before COVID around how we get the constituent parts of our business to spend time with each other in a non-working environment, getting to know each other, getting to understand each other better, likes, dislikes, all of those good things. So we kept that program going as much as we could in the times when we weren't able to get together. And what we did the second we were back together again was we really ramped that up. So, for example, we're going surfing as a company to Portrush in a few weeks' time on a Friday afternoon. We've had plenty of different things that we do together as a group, from making pizzas to all sorts of fancy, wonderful things to get together. And I think it's just about making sure that you create those opportunities for connection amongst your staff and friends. And we're fortunate in it, again, I said, we have a young workforce, so they're very much keen to spend time socially with each other, and they do so on a regular basis. So we haven't noticed that. What we did notice, I suppose, was people who started with us during the pandemic, when they came into the office. I think they thought they were going to see an advertising agency like something you would see in a film, and it was quite the opposite, really. And we had to encourage people to turn the music up within reason, and spend time with each other and have fun together. And you're allowed to have a laugh, and you're allowed to have fun, and you're allowed to do things outside of normal working hours or during the working hours if it sees fit.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So just to be clear, not every advertising agency is like that a very popular American show that was on our televisions a few years ago.
No, well, sometimes, but then other times no.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, I was very interested, Lauren, when you spoke about the co-creation of space by employees themselves. Does that help in terms of bringing that buzz of the workplace back?
It has, Damien, and I think one of the big challenges we had, particularly in our head offices, some days people were coming in and they could be sitting on a big floor with only 1 or 2 other people, and they were thinking, well, why am I here? So the reset spaces have really helped because we've given people the chance to put in those what they want, and it's a really good way then that people can go and just socialise together as well. But we've also encouraged other things. So some of our bigger teams did coffee roulettes where they were randomly each week assigned, somebody different to go for a coffee with, and that worked really well. And then we'd also encouraged, as we started to come back to work, we encouraged all our teams just to take sort of a half day out of the office and do something together as a team. So we had, people were doing cooking classes, people were going for drinks, for dinners, and that really helped, I think, get people excited about coming in and socializing with other team members again.
Okay, thanks very much, Lauren. That's fantastic. Thank you to Craig Thompson for that question, by the way. Thanks, Craig, and hopefully there was enough from what Sorka, Mark and Lauren said there for you to give some thought for your own company. We're probably only going to have maybe time for one more question, and I've probably left this one. There are other questions that have been asked, but don't worry, we will get a response back to you. And I know some of the hosts have been actually responding to some of the questions. I know Sorka was asked one about notice period, and she's responded in the chat box as well. We might actually try and collate some responses to all of those questions from all of the 5 employers, so that you can get a broad sense of what everybody's doing. But this one has actually come in from Helen Bowman from BITC itself, and it's a pretty emotive one, which is probably the reason why I've left it the last. So with 44% of the UK workforce having caring responsibilities, and some people haven't feel that the norm has changed over the last 2 years, with a lot of people working from home and being able to balance childcare with work, what are companies now doing in the regard to bringing people back to work, and how are they expecting their employees to deal with those childcare arrangements? I think I'll go in the order of which you presented so that I don't offend anybody. So sorry, Sorka, that starts with you. And Lauren, you can be prepared. You're going to be last.
Yeah, it is really significant. I think it's right to say that has changed over the past 2 years. And like I myself have 2 children school age, and it's great to be able to go out and pick them up. I'm fortunate enough they're not so small that they can't cope. If I go back then and do a couple of meetings, they can look after themselves. But it's even great to have those few minutes with them. So yes, I mean, with our fully flexible model at Allstate, we hope that part of that will enable people to manage some of those caring responsibilities where they need to, whether it is the longer term things like childcare or elder care, or shorter term emergency situations where they need to maybe change and flex throughout their working week as they need to. We also have one of our employee resource groups, All Care, within Allstate, which is a support group and an education and awareness group in relation to caring responsibilities. So that support is there as well within the business, which I think is important. So we're continuing some of those things, but I think that flexibility will give people, a good ability to allow to some extent for those caring responsibilities. And we're very, very cognizant of that. As I said, leading with empathy. I know right from the top, our managing director, John Healy, would be saying to people, respond to people's situations in a human way, and, work with them, give them what they need in terms of what's happening in their lives. And you'll very much, you get that back from people in terms of their loyalty and their willingness to work hard. So yeah, I'll let others speak, but I'm sure there's lots of more ideas too.
Thank you, Sorka. Kieran?
Yeah, this is tricky. On one level, you could look at it on the basis that people have now got an awful lot more flexibility than they were ever afforded before. So that, with that and with a reasonable amount of notice, then people, you could say we would hope people would be able to organize their ongoing and kind of structural care responsibilities. There are, of course, those situations that crop up. There's the emergency situations and all and the unforeseen stuff. Obviously, when that happens, it's fine. Do what you need to do. You be with your family. You do that school run or that collection, or go to that appointment. That's there's no question that isn't appropriate. But I think it's around having a quid pro quo, a degree of flexibility from the employer, and a degree then of kind of of personal responsibility on the part of the employee to meet you halfway when there are ongoing and kind of long-term arrangements being sought. So it's a, and then just from another point is that we do have a provision, and I'm going to get the name of it wrong. It's care call, I think, that where we do have a provision where people can get access to childcare at very short notice, and that's facilitated by the firm. So that has also helped from time to time.
Thanks, Kieran. Thank you for that, Laura.
Yeah, so I agree with what others have said in terms of the increased flexibility has obviously supported people with care and responsibilities. But also I think what we found is that the pandemic kind of brought people's lives and works together in a way that it hasn't before. So people got to know children and families, and there was more empathy. So I think going forward, it'll enable those conversations to happen. I think in an easier way, because we have sort of broken those boundaries down. So there's a more human element to it. And also what we're doing in Queen's is we have a carers network like some others have, but also we're then looking at setting up a carers passport. So it's something that you bring with you and you put the information, your care and responsibilities, and if you move team, you take that and share it with your manager. So it's just trying to really normalise that.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Mark?
Ours is really simple. It's with this mantra, it's just people first always. So if there is a situation that is an emergency or whatever, it is literally drop what you're doing and go and sort out your emergency. I think where it gets a wee bit more difficult is if it does move into what's being suggested in terms of longer term. And I think that's where an honest conversation needs to be had, and an honesty sort of goes both ways, in the sense that people that come to us and honestly tell us what the issues are, they know, because we do it consistently, that people come first. So we're going to try to find a solution that accommodates. But ultimately, we'll also have a conversation if we can't find a way to make it work. We'll have to make that clear. And sometimes those are very difficult conversations to be had. But they need to be had, because we're not going to fix anything by not discussing it. So people first always is a really good mantra for our managers, because they know instinctively what the decision that they need to take in any given situation is. And usually people, you'd think that maybe sometimes people would take advantage of that. That has not been our experience at all. Everybody has been fantastic in terms of how they've approached that. And anybody who did do anything that was sort of out of the context of it, it only ever really happened once, because we had those honest conversations after the fact.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And Lauren, to finish us off.
Yes, very similar to other people. I mean, as an organisation, we're very outputs focused. So again, like others have said, we're happy for people to manage their own time, and we find that with people with care and responsibilities, they may log on a bit earlier, then take some time off in the afternoon and then come back on. If there's emergency situations, we do have a special leave policy where they can just take some time off, fully paid, to support that. But again, really where it is causing challenges, it's a case by case basis, and just about having those open conversations and working to a solution that works for both us and the individual themselves as well.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Can I thank the five speakers? I know Stephanie McConnell will bring her back in, and she probably will thank them anyway. But can I thank Sorka, Kieran, Laura, Mark, and Lauren for their time and their contributions today. I mean, I know I've really drawn some inspiration from what I've heard. The world and the future of work has been a challenge for us for some time, but I suspect COVID has really accelerated that challenge on top of us now. And it's an issue that we're all facing, no matter what phase we're at, in terms of whether we've had staff back for some time, or whether we're bringing them back in the future. And I suspect there's a number of things we've heard from all of the speakers in terms of common themes around communication with your staff and speaking to them as adults and having courageous conversations with them and finding out what matters to them, but equally about building trust, because I think we have established trust with our staff over the last number of years, particularly since COVID started. And that's meant a sense of empowerment has been given to staff. But I think, as Mark himself said, that equally means we've got to have honesty as well in the workplace. And I think we're entering into a new form of contract now as we move forward between employer and employee on how we can get business done, but doing so in a manner which allows employees to feel as though they have some control over the world of work, albeit with a supportive employer. So thank you to the 5 speakers, and thank you to the participants and all of the questions you popped into the chat bar. We will come back to everybody that's asked a question with a summary of all of the questions asked, and hopefully get a response from all of the individual employers if I haven't asked them the questions. So thank you all for your time today. And I'm just going to hand you back to Stephanie.
Thank you, Damien. So just to finish this off, additional resources and the recording of this webinar will be available on Business in the Community's website, and links will be sent to all attendees after today's event. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you'd like to further explore anything that was raised today, or if you'd like to discuss some of the initiatives that Business in the Community are doing to support employers in this journey. We've some great work being done with regards to supporting businesses with getting involved in the community, and volunteering opportunities, which we know helps to promote positive well-being. We also have wellbeing initiatives that can complement an employer bringing their staff back to the workplace. So please do reach out to me. Thank you to each of our speakers this afternoon. Thank you to Damien and Ulster University for partnering with us to deliver this event. And thank you for attending this webinar. I do hope that you've been able to take something useful away from today to apply in your own workplaces. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.